Congressman Mike Johnson is joining us this morning on the morning after the House votes to impeach our president. Congressman, it's historic. It's only happened twice before, but you're very disappointed. I could see it in your speech on the House floor that you were just kind of flabbergasted that y'all were doing this.
I was, and I am, and it's shameful. This is the first time, as I pointed out on the House floor last night, it's the first time in the history of the Republic, 243 years, that you have a single-party impeachment. The only thing bipartisan about what happened last night was that we had Democrats flip and vote with us on the Republican side to oppose this sham. So why is that such a problem, Aaron? Everyone has to recognize the Founding Fathers warned us. I mean, they feared a single-party impeachment. And the reason they said that is because they knew that it would bitterly divide the country. And they openly said and wrote about, spoke about how it might be irreparable damage to the country. Because once you weaponize the impeachment function, this rarely used device in the Constitution, that's only supposed to be reserved for the most extreme cases when you have a president who's engaged in treason or bribery or a high crime or misdemeanor. None of that exists here, of course. The founders were afraid that if politicians ever weaponized that function in the Congress, then you would open a Pandora's box that couldn't be closed. And you have to think about the future implications of what really began last night.
Precedent doesn't seem to be a very big deal to the Democrats in this process now, though.
No, it does, Dan, and that's the problem is the calculation they've made here is so short-sighted. They're not worried about the future, but what I said and to many of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle all day yesterday during this whole charade, and as we've been saying for weeks, pulling Democrat friends aside and saying, guys, think about this now. Look, think about it. What happens a few years from now, or 10 years from now, or 20 years from now? You have a Democrat in the White House, and you have a Republican majority in the House. Do you think the Republican base in the country is going to be satisfied to allow that president to go forward and have policies they disagree with or communications they don't like or friendships or phone calls that they disagree with? No, they're going to demand that they be impeached because you've now set the bar so low that we're going into tribal politics now. I mean, if you think politics were divided before this, heaven help us. I mean, that's why this is so serious. I don't know how we're going to fix it. I don't know how to unwind it. And
what's going to happen next? You mentioned something about due process and the rules of civil procedure, and now the speaker is talking about not sending it on to the Senate. What's your prediction?
Absolutely outrageous. Absolutely outrageous. And what you have to remember is the reason we're here is because they were breathlessly, this was so urgent. I mean, they charge, for example, Article 2 of these impeachment articles is obstruction of Congress, right? And I made this point over and over in committee and on the floor and in the media. That is an absurd charge. They charge President Trump. They're impeaching him for doing something that every president in the modern era has done. Presidents on lots of controversial issues don't always just turn over everything that Congress asks for in the first request, because they're sensitive, high-level communications with staffers and stuff, and there's a separation of powers issue there. There's an executive privilege that has always been evoked, but it's always been very simply resolved, because when you have an impasse between the legislative branch and the executive, you simply go to the third branch, the judiciary, and you get a judge to issue an order. A judge, an objective third party, gets to decide and break that tie. And often they'll issue an order compelling further discovery. Oh, okay, well, you do have to turn over these documents or these witnesses, and the administration complies. That's what would have happened here. But the Democrats didn't do it, and you have to remember why. Because they were so breathlessly, this is so urgent. We don't have time to go to the courts, they said. We have to do this because President Trump is a threat to the Constitution. They literally argued that in the court. Now Nancy Pelosi goes to the microphones last night. Oh, yes, we got our impeachment. Oh, what a somber day, she pretends. This is so sad. We didn't want to do this. Remember, 95 of them voted to impeach Donald Trump before July of this year, before any of the events about Ukraine even happened, okay? But no, we didn't want to do this, and this is so terrible. But you know what? We're going to hold this for a while and just sort of see how things play out. Well, what happened to the urgency? The whole reason you did this because you said you didn't have time to go to the courts. I mean, it is patently absurd, and we'll see how it plays out today. But it's heartbreaking. It really is a great frustration.
Congressman Johnson, does this harm the legacy of President Donald Trump at all?
I don't think so, Aaron. Look, it puts an asterisk by his name. I mean, sadly, only the third president in history to have had to endure a House vote like that. But on the other hand, there should be a second asterisk that says that this is the only single-party impeachment. It's a sham, the whole thing. And so, yeah, I mean, it affects it that way. It affects that historical note. But in the context, when they're teaching this in civics classes a few years from now, they'll have to explain, well, this was unique. That was extraordinary.
And no crimes.
Look at the articles and look what they did.
And no crimes.
What's that?
And no crimes listed.
And no crimes. Thank you. That's another huge thing I kept trying to point out in committee. You know, when they did Andrew Johnson in the 1860s and Bill Clinton in 98, and when they went after Richard Nixon, he resigned before the House vote took place. But in each of those three previous occasions, you had specific evidence, overwhelming evidence, of specific criminal acts. And that does not exist here. And that's why this is such a travesty.
Senator Kennedy says, and I'm quoting, he's got great quotes. He says, impeachment is dead as fried chicken in the Senate. No doubt, huh?
Well, that should be a headline. And he's right. And it is, because there's no way that you're going to get all those Republican senators to flip sides and vote for impeachment. And I pray that there's some reasonable Democrats who will do as two or three reasonable Democrats in the House did, and look at this and in good conscience look at themselves in the mirror and say, we can't do this. We shouldn't do this. We cannot allow these, our political desires to override the Constitution. And that's what it is. They're impeaching Donald Trump because they don't like him. And I said that pretty forcefully, and I got pretty upset about it after, in hour 12 of the committee last week, because that's what this is. You have Democrats in the House who have decided they loathe President Trump. They dislike him so much that they are willing to just run roughshod over the Constitution and completely disregard the Pandora's box that they're opening with this. And that's not how our system works. If you don't like the president, he goes on the ballot again after 4 years. We have an election in 11 months. Let the people decide this. Mm-hmm. Democrats in the House cannot get in the middle of the people's will. They want to erase and nullify the votes of 63 million Americans who voted to make Donald J. Trump the president. That's not how a republic operates.
But every impeached president was elected by a lot of people, right?
Well, that's true, but they also committed high crimes and misdemeanors. Mm-hmm.
There's
right?
the key to it.
I mean, look, Dan, think about this. Every president in the history of the country has made unpopular decisions. Wow, of course. They've also terribly upset leaders in the opposing party. Every president has. But no, we didn't try to impeach him in our previous history. We didn't try to impeach Barack Obama. Man, I thought some of his decisions were terrible. I thought he weaponized the IRS, for example, and went after people. We could go on and fast and furious. All the Benghazi, all the terrible things that happened in that administration. He used executive orders. Remember, he famously said, all I need is a pen and a cell phone and I can change the law. Well, that's a direct violation of our constitutional order. But nobody tried to impeach him over it. We said, we'll get you at the next election. And that's how this has always worked until last night.
Mike, one more thing, the last minute or so. I can't help but feel like, can y'all finally get back to real work now? Are you hearing that a lot?
Aaron, I was in an elevator last night after that fateful vote, going down to the basement to walk through the tunnels, get back to the office. And there were three of my good friends who Democrats in the elevator, and we quietly lamented together. My word, where do we go from here? There is so much important work that this country needs us to do and that we haven't done for a year because we've been mired in all this nonsense. And I just don't know. I mean, I prayed last night before I went to bed for the country and our nation and my colleagues on both sides of the aisle that we can somehow get past this and see what happens in the aftermath. It's just a really dark day for the Congress and for the country.
Congressman Mike Johnson, thanks so much for your time.